The unsolved disappearance of the Carroll A. Deering, often called the ghost ship of the Outer Shoals, is one of the most chilling maritime mysteries in history. In January 1921, a massive, 5-masted schooner was found hard aground on the treacherous Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Every single sail was set, the galley table was cleared for a meal, and food was still warming on the stove. Yet, the entire 11-man crew had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a pair of stray cats. What makes the Deering tragedy so compelling is not just the empty ship, but the dense web of piracy, mutiny, and geopolitical paranoia that surrounded it, creating a riddle that the FBI, the U.S. Navy, and the Coast Guard could never solve. To understand how a massive cargo ship becomes a ghost vessel, we have to look at its final, ill-fated voyage. The Carroll A. Deering set sail from Norfolk, Virginia, in late August 1920, bound for Rio de Janeiro with a massive cargo of coal. The ship was commanded by an experienced and highly respected captain named William Merritt, but just days into the voyage, Merritt fell critically ill. He was forced to step down at the first port of call, leaving his son, who was serving as first mate, to look after him. Desperate for a replacement, the ship's owners hastily hired a veteran captain named Willis Wormel. Wormel was 70 years old, gruff, and deeply suspicious of the crew he was handed. His first mate, Charles McClellan, was a notorious heavy drinker with a quick temper. The tension between the old captain and his rebellious first mate was immediate, setting a dark tone for the long journey south. The voyage down to Rio went smoothly enough on paper, but the cracks in the crew's discipline were worsening. While docked in Brazil, Captain Wormel met with an old friend, another sea captain, and confessed his deep anxieties. Wormel explicitly stated that he did not trust his crew, particularly his first mate, whom he believed was actively trying to undermine his authority. He complained that the men were unruly and that McClellan was constantly drunk, stirring up resentment among the sailors. Despite these severe warnings, the ship took on a new cargo of linseed and began its return journey to the United States in December 1920. The last time anyone heard directly from Captain Wormel was during a brief stop in Barbados for supplies. While the captain was ashore, First Mate McClellan got into a drunken brawl at a local cafe. When the harbor master detained him, McClellan openly boasted that he would take control of the ship before they reached home, and that Captain Wormel wouldn't make it back alive. Wormel forgave his mate and bailed him out, a decision that would haunt the investigation for decades. The Carroll A. Deering pulled anchor and sailed away from Barbados, disappearing into the vast Atlantic. The ship re-emerged in the historical record on January 29, 1921. A lightship keeper stationed off the coast of North Carolina spotted the Deering sailing past. A red-haired man, who did not look or sound like Captain Wormel, hailed the lightship through a megaphone. He reported that the ship had lost both of its anchors in a storm and asked the keeper to relay the message to the owners. The keeper noted that the crew seemed to be milling around the deck aimlessly, ignoring standard maritime protocol. Crucially, this was the last confirmed sighting of anyone aboard the vessel. 3 days later, in the early morning mist of January 31st, Coast Guard lookouts spotted the Carroll A. Deering stranded on the Outer Shoals. The ship was trapped in an area notorious for shipwrecks, battered by heavy surf. Because the weather was severe, rescue boats could not safely reach the vessel for several days. When investigators finally boarded the schooner on February 4th, they prepared themselves to find a tragedy born of a storm. Instead, they walked into a living nightmare. The ship was entirely functional, yet completely deserted. The sails were fully set, indicating the ship was under navigation right up until it struck the shoal. In the galley, pots and pans were out, and food had been prepared for the next meal, suggesting the crew abandoned the ship in a massive hurry, or were forced off. However, the most chilling discoveries were the missing items. The crew's personal effects were gone. The ship's logbook, which recorded every detail of the voyage, was missing. The navigation equipment, the chronometers, and the captain's papers were entirely wiped from the ship. Most disturbing of all, both of the ship's lifeboats were missing, and the tackle used to lower them had been cleanly cut, not broken by the storm. The U.S. government launched a massive multi-agency investigation led by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and Assistant Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover. They looked into three primary theories, each more unsettling than the last. The first theory was that the ship fell victim to a highly organized ring of rum runners, or modern pirates. In 1921, Prohibition was in full swing, and the waters off the Atlantic coast were crawling with smugglers. Several other ships had vanished in the same region around the same time, leading many to believe a coordinated pirate fleet was capturing vessels, stealing their cargo, and murdering the crews to eliminate witnesses. The second theory, and the one favored by the FBI, was an internal mutiny. The bad blood between Captain Wormel and First Mate McClellan was well documented. Investigators hypothesized that McClellan had finally executed his threat, rallying the crew to overthrow and murder the aging captain. According to this theory, the mutineers ran the ship onto the shoals by mistake, due to poor navigation or a lack of experience, panicked, packed their bags, and fled in the lifeboats, leaving the ship to its fate. Yet, if they fled in lifeboats near a busy coast, why did not a single man ever surface? No lifeboat was ever recovered, and no body ever washed ashore. The third and most dramatic theory reflected the intense political anxieties of the era, the Red Scare. The early 1920s saw immense fear of communist subversion in the United States. Federal investigators seriously explored the possibility that radical Union sympathizers, or Soviet agents, had infiltrated the crew, seized the vessel, and steered it toward a hidden mothership, taking the crew captive to build a secret communist merchant fleet. While it sounds far-fetched today, the government took it seriously enough to raid union halls along the eastern seaboard, looking for the missing sailors. Months into the investigation, a breakthrough seemed to appear when a beachcomber found a message in a bottle washed up on the North Carolina coast. The note, allegedly written by a crew member, claimed that the Deering had been captured by an unknown oil tanker and that the crew was being held hostage. The note sent shockwaves through the public and reignited the pirate theory. However, forensic analysis of the handwriting later revealed the note was a cruel hoax, written by a local resident hoping to gain notoriety. With the note debunked, the trail went completely cold. The government officially closed the case, handling it as an inexplicable maritime disaster. The wreckage of the Carroll A. Deering remained trapped on the shoals, a grim monument to the vanished crew, until it was eventually blasted apart by dynamite to prevent it from becoming a hazard to other ships. Today, over a century later, the mystery of the Carroll A. Deering remains entirely unsolved. Did the crew perish in a desperate mutiny gone wrong? Were they executed by ruthless smugglers operating in the shadows of Prohibition? Or did they encounter something even more terrifying out in the deep Atlantic, forcing them to abandon a perfectly good ship with the tables set and the stove still burning? The sea keeps its secrets, and the true fate of the 11 men who sailed the ghost ship remains buried forever beneath the shifting sands of the outer shoals.